Welcome back, everybody, to We Are TPM with myself, Kyle Teixeira, sitting across from me, John Teixeira, and today we have a special guest with us.
Patrick Noonan.
Patrick Noonan, that is correct. So this week we are going to dive deeper into a section of last week's topic. Last week we went into ways to avoid and get around and transfer your capital gains tax. This week we're going to talk about 1031 exchanges, which we briefly brushed over, and now we're going to do a deep dive with Patrick into that today. Yeah. So if there's anything you guys hear on this today that you want to talk to us about, give us a call, 817-818-9039. Shoot us an email, showmethemoney@wearetpm. Now let's get into it.
Yeah, a proper introduction for Patrick. First of all, Patrick, thank you for joining us. I want to find out more about your company, but I used to refer, we refer 1031 exchanges to our investors. I got a guy in New York that we used to refer, and I ran across Patrick. I don't know, it was about a year ago or so. You and I started communicating by email, and man, it's really nice to have somebody here locally that we can send somebody to, because people like to know that they've got somebody on their team that's local, right, Patrick?
That's right. It's funny. A lot of folks still like to sit down and meet face to face, the old-fashioned way, and it's good to have a local connection that actually can work nationally. So even though I'm located in Texas, I do transactions routinely all over the country, especially with the way the market's moving right now, where there's a lot of relocation going on because of people's realization that they can really work from anywhere. And the 1031 has benefited from that a great deal. Folks that have been basically stationary in one area for a long time have realized they can move out to the country, they can move to different parts of the country and still be efficient in getting their job done. And with that goes, often they've got investment properties that they're going to sell and relocate as well. Obviously, Texas is a very hot market. So when brokers and CPAs and attorneys are talking to their customers and those customers are planning a move, they'll often mention or bring up 1031 exchanges so that they could perhaps let's say you've got property in California or New York or Chicago or Florida, and you're moving to Texas and you'd like to, kind of bring those properties along with you just for the ease of being a landlord or property manager, or you're looking to get better returns on your investment. With California, you're not going to see the same cash flow that you see on investment properties in Texas, especially right now, and nor are you seeing the gains, the appreciation that we're experiencing here in Texas, and have been now for quite some time. It's been 3 to 5 years of double-digit appreciation in most of the counties in Texas.
Yeah, definitely. And just because you talked about moving, Patrick, just want to specify this product is primarily used for investment property, correct?
Yeah, that's right. But when people move, they also tend to move if they've got investment properties where they're coming from, they're going to move it to where they live.
They bring their portfolio with them, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but the types of people that are exchanging are really broad. Okay, so you've got folks that are, may have rent houses or land someplace, and they're moving to, Texas to buy. Maybe they're going to buy rent houses or multifamily or retail, office. All of the investment property types are exchangeable with one another. So it's often misconstrued that the like kind definition is very specific, whereas it's not. I mean, people think, well, I'm selling my manufacturing building, so I have to go buy another manufacturing building. In fact, they could buy from any of the other categories, including royalty interest in gas and oil or mineral rights, and often do. It's a market-driven thing, just like anybody else or anything else. So, we'll have seasons where it's multifamily all day, every day, and sometimes it's office buildings. And right now, we've seen a big increase in people buying land and holding it for appreciation. So in order for a property to be eligible for 1031, it really has to be held for investment or productive use in a trade or business. So not a primary residence or second home, but if you're buying any other property and it's not a personal use property, you're going to rent it. You're just going to hold it for appreciation. Those properties are all eligible for 1031 treatment, provided they, adhere to some, fairly simple rules.
So, Patrick, sometimes I try to get into the psyche of somebody that might be listening to us that doesn't have any idea what a 1031 exchange is, right? They've heard about it for the first time, maybe from us or somebody else, but they really don't know what it is. Give us a really simple definition for that layman term of what a 1031 exchange is and why they would use it.
Absolutely. So basically, boiled down to the simplest fact is you're deferring the capital gain tax that you would normally pay when you sell investment property. And you do that through Section 1 or 1031 of the tax code. And basically what it allows for is if you're reinvesting in more investment property of equal or greater value, using all your cash towards the purchase of the new property, the proceeds from your sale, and replacing any debt you had on the property you sold with equal or greater, you can achieve 100% tax deferral. And, why would you want to do that? Well, in most cases, people would rather have their money work for them than just go to the IRS, right? If you're paying those capital gain taxes, it's really not doing you a service.
That's right.
But as an investor in real estate, especially if you're starting out young, you're going to ideally continue to reinvest in new real estate and defer taxes through 1031. And that multiplier effect will work for you where you've got that equity that's achieving, appreciation. You've got, the fact that you're possibly making more income on reinvesting in more, preferable properties. So those are the kinds of reasons why people exchange. But really, when it boils right down to it, you're deferring the tax that you would normally pay when you sell investment property. And that can be for capital gain tax for the sale of an investment property. It starts at 15% on the gain, which is what you make over what you bought it for. And basically, if you're starting out fresh, it's actually over your adjusted basis in the property, which is I'll go down to that. That's kind of a rabbit hole, but
Yeah.
Short of it is you're going to defer 15 to 20% on the realized gain, which is what you're making on the property, and you're also deferring the depreciation tax recapture that you would normally pay. So most folks, when they buy an investment property, part of the reason they're going to do it is because they want to take depreciation to offset their ordinary income.
Right.
And when they do that, that's great, but that the IRS doesn't get. They're going to try and collect that when you sell the property, and unless you do a 1031 exchange. And that 25%, they call it depreciation recapture tax, is also deferred. So, for example, if I sell, let's say I've got a RV park or a warehouse, and I'm going to sell it for $1 million, and I bought it for $500,000 2 years ago. So I'm going to be taxed on that entire $500,000 at 15 to 20%. For wealthy taxpayers. There's an additional 3.8%. So that's just on the gain, and then the depreciation that I've taken over the last 2 years is going to be taxed at 25%. So it adds up quickly, and especially if you're in states where they also collect capital gain tax. So you've got your 25%, you've got your 20, your 23 and 3/8, or 23, 3/8, and then you've got state capital gain tax as well. So in California, they collect an additional 13.1%. So now you're looking at, it's eating up your profit pretty quickly, just tax.
So the 1031 exchange handles it. It goes along with the state tax also. It kind of defers that as well.
It defers state tax as well. There's some states that don't recognize 1031 exchange. Pennsylvania being one, and Puerto Rico being another. You can't exchange in or out of Puerto Rico. You can exchange all over the country freely. So sell property in Texas and buy in, Florida, New York, Chicago. You can buy in the Northern Mariana Islands or the U.S. Virgin Islands or Guam. The only place that gets ripped off again is Puerto Rico. For some reason, they don't allow 1031 in and out.
So to make this, I guess, even a more simple example, this is essentially a way to let these unrealized gains in a property be transferred to another property and remain unrealized, essentially, so that they're not taxed. It is
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah, because you're going to respend. If I'm going to restate what you said a little bit, Patrick, you're going to take the money that you gained at the closing table and you're going to respend it and reinvest it into new investment property. So it's not really going into your account; it's transferring from one account to one property to another, right? So let's say I've got $100,000 left over. What happens with that?
So yeah. In order to achieve 100% tax deferral, you've got to do three things: buy equal to or greater than what you sell for, use all the cash towards the new purchases of investment property, and replace any debt. Now, people often don't do all three of those things, but it still may be a viable exchange. You'll have what we call a partial exchange. So in your example, if let's say you sell for $500,000 and you end up buying for $400,000 and you have $100,000 of cash left over, you're simply taxed on that $100,000 of cash that you receive. Mm-hmm. So, when I'm talking to folks, I'm always trying to get to the basics of how much are you looking to do? Are you looking to reinvest? First of all, what's your tax liability? Do you want to invest equal to what you sold for? And if those answers are all yes, then it's a no-brainer, right? Go forward and defer. But it could still be a no-brainer if you're taking some cash out or buying for less. You don't want to take so much out or buy for so much less that your tax liability essentially is the same.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question, Patrick. Let's talk limits. So everybody who's trying to, bypass the tax code or think they can outsmart the IRS. Why don't I just defer this, sell it, put it in exchange, and I'm not going to buy my next investment property for 3-4 years? Would they let me do that? I already know the answer, but
no, there's time frames on the 1031, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of rules that can make an exchange challenging. And I'd say the first and foremost of those are the time limits. So with every exchange, think of it as having a lifespan of 180 calendar days. And that begins on the day, in most cases, where you're selling or closing on the sale of your property. And the first 45 days of that is your identification period, which is also very challenging right now because of the way the market is moving. If you're trying to identify a property that you want to purchase within that first 45 days, it can be challenging right now because properties are selling so quickly. So that's one of the bigger challenges my customers are having. So my advice to them is to be pretty aggressive about going out and getting under contract on properties. It's not a requirement to identify a property to be under contract, but right now it's a really good idea because that first 45 days, you've got to submit your identification. And let's say you submit an identification of 3 properties. Well, in order for your exchange to continue, you're going to have to close on one of those 3 or all of those 3 or some of those 3 in order to get a deferral. If you find out after, and for any reason, you can't close on the properties you identify, basically you're going to have to pay the taxes as if you had not attempted to do an exchange.
Interesting.
So you have 45 days to identify the properties, and then those have to be the ones you end up closing. So your plan has to be set within that first 45 days, and it can't change after that. Am I hearing that right?
That's exactly right. So by midnight on day 45, you're committed to what you've identified, and those are the properties you can buy.
So it sounds. I'm sorry,
if I get lucky enough, and I talk to folks before their closing day, or a month or two ahead, if they're planning ahead and they're investigating 1031, my advice is go out, try to find a property now, get under contract if you can, and if you can stipulate that you're going to close after you close on your sale, then you're in much better shape than the guy that's calling me the night before he's closing on his sale saying I want to do a 1031 and doesn't realize these rules are in place.
That's interesting.
Because then they only have that 45 days to try to find properties that are viable to close on.
Huh. That's really interesting, because usually the purchaser of your investment property is an investor as well, right? And they may understand the 1031 exchange timelines as well. So that would be an easy request of a buyer to put off closing maybe for a few days, a week or two, whatever, until you are able to get through that, get something under contract.
In normal markets, it's not unreasonable, but this market is bananas. Yes. I mean, I am talking, people have been in a frenzy. I'm not kidding, for the last 2 years. Properties are selling as soon as they're put on the market. And this isn't just in one category. It's in residential, commercial,
multifamily.
Anything in that strict of a timeline in these market conditions is, I'm surely hard. So let me ask you, can you re-identify within that 45-day period? So say I close, sure. You can?
Yeah, so you can amend your identification as many times as you need to up to midnight on day 45. But once that day midnight passes, it's over. So, and I always like to try to get people to identify at least a couple of days before midnight on day 45, because there's actually a way you could fail your exchange by simply over-identifying property. And so I like to be able to talk to them and review the properties that they're identifying, and make sure that the math works, because there's a lot of rules with 1031. There's rules within rules. And just in the identification rules, there's three. And the first one is the 3 property rule. And it says you can identify up to 3 properties and they can have any combined value. So you'd sell for, let's say you sell for $100,000, and you go out and you identify 3 properties and their combined value could be 100,000, $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion. Doesn't matter. But once you identify more than 3 properties, you're subject to a cap of 200%, or twice the sales price of your relinquished property, the property you sold. It's the same example. You sell for 100,000, and you go out and you identify 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 properties. Well, it could be okay as long as the combined value is not more than 200,000. And you can see how that could be a challenge.
Okay, so on the other side of that, is there limits on how much capital gains you can defer? So say I have, $2 million, it's a big property or something. I'm trying to exchange $2 million worth of equity into other investments. Is there any thresholds on that?
No, I do transactions anywhere from, a $50,000 rent house to a couple of $1 billion in, office buildings or.
Wait, somebody's got a $50,000 rent house?
What's that?
I said, wait a minute. Somebody's got a $50,000 rent house?
Yeah, there's actually, they're surprisingly, they're out there still. Now, they might not be where you want to buy.
Are they like in Alaska or something, out in the middle of the snow or something, or like an igloo? Is that what that is?
So like the same goes for the $500 million manufacturing plant. You're selling that, there's no cap. I've got a company that does sit down restaurants like Red Robin, Buffalo Wild Wings, and they probably own 2,000 or 3,000 of those restaurants, and every time that they sell one, they're going to exchange it into another. So this company not only has a large amount of tax being deferred, but they'll have multiple exchanges going on at a time, maybe 300 or 400 a year. So there's no limitation on how many you do or when you do them. And no cap on how much tax you can defer.
Well, and I'm going to keep playing devil's advocate here, Patrick, if you don't mind, because I got and you partially answered this, but I'm going to get a little specific. So say I wanted to exchange, identify one property, and then I wanted to exchange to, a stock investment, but more specifically a REIT, because, that kind of falls under the property category. So is that something that's allowed? Is there ways that can be done?
Well, that's a great question and very good devil's advocate question. So you can exchange almost any real property for any other, but you have to exchange a real property right. So you can't
Gotcha.
exchange shares or partnership interests with 1031 exchange.
Interesting.
So REITs actually sell you shares in the REIT, right? The real estate investment trust. Now, there are products that are similar to a REIT that are set up specifically for 1031 customers. And the way they're structured, well, let me tell you what they are. They're Delaware statutory trusts. Now, a Delaware statutory trust, or DST, is designed for 1031 people that want to reinvest in property, but maybe they don't want to be a property manager. Maybe they don't want to, have to be liable for anything that happens on their property or collect rents or any of that. So DST might contain a couple of Walgreens or student housing in Austin or a Home Depot in Des Moines. There's a lot of different off-the-shelf kind of products that are available. And the DST providers allow the 1031 customers to actually buy a fractional interest in the offering as a tenant in common with other investors. And therefore, they're not buying shares. They're not buying partnership interest. They do get to invest in more institutional grade real estate, but they don't have the kind of the hassle of owning and managing a property. The other appealing thing for that is if you've got exchangers that are leveraged highly on their property, there's a debt component built in. So let's say I'm selling my property for, I don't know, use $100,000, and I have an $80,000 loan on it, and I want to sell it and reinvest, and I want to do a 1031 exchange, but I don't want to go out and get another loan. Maybe my credit got torn up or something happened. And I don't want to be a property manager anymore. I just want to go someplace that I can get some passive income. I'll be happy with that. So you buy into this DST, and it's got the part, you're going to use all your 20% of cash you receive, and then it'll have a debt component for the 80% that you need to get to 100% tax deferral. So it's pretty neat in that regard. And it works for people that are, getting close to retirement age, that are interested in not being property managers anymore. It's also a good way to save an exchange. So in this market where you're not entirely 100% sure you're going to be able to close on what you identify, one of the properties you might want to identify as a DST interest equal to the sales price of the property you're selling. So if the other properties fall through, you can close on that DST. Or you can also identify a delta. Let's say I sell for $100,000 and I want to go buy an $80,000 property. Now I've got this $20,000 left over. I can put that into a DST to make the exchange 100%.
Well, Kyle, we've talked about a whole bunch of technical stuff, and you know how I kind of gloss over when we get technical, right? That's why I hire people like Patrick to get this stuff done. So let's talk about.
Yeah, and I'm so geeky, I forget when I'm getting technical. So you guys snap your fingers or something when your eyes are glazing.
You're doing fine, Patrick. Kyle is absorbing it and loving this. He's just like you are. So I want to talk about real quick the type of person that might use this as somebody that's maybe changing markets. Maybe they're taking advantage of the current situation and the current market that they're in somewhere because they want to maybe sell their home in California and buy two of them in Dallas or Fort Worth area, right? Or it could be anywhere. That's kind of the ideal scenario that you're probably seeing, right, Patrick? That's mostly who's doing this. Get out of one market to get into another.
We see a lot of that, a lot of reload, but also there's some reasons that I can't call them reasons to exchange, but there are things that a company, the reason is you want to get the tax deferral, but there are other benefits that will coincide with your exchange. The first one, like you said, changing markets, right? I'm going to get out of California. I'm going to go someplace where I can make more cash and I'll have less tax and it's an easier lifestyle. The other would be estate planning. I get this a lot. I do a lot of farm and ranch. I kind of positioned myself in that market about 3 years ago, kind of seeing what was going to happen with land. I should have bet on myself because it's really turned out to be a remarkable thing. People are investing in land and farms and ranches all over, and it is the farmers and ranchers are seeing, what they're selling their property for is more than they ever imagined that they would earn, ever. right? So the guy's selling his, 500-acre ranch for $20 million. And he's like, oh, crap, what am I going to do? I don't want to pay the taxes on $20 million. So maybe I'll go buy 5 smaller ranch farms. And I'll diversify in that regard so that I get my tax deferral. But I'm also doing it because I'm going to will each of my 5 kids a ranch. And when those kids inherit a ranch at $5 million, they're going to get what's called a step up in the tax basis of the property, the fair market value of the property at the time I ranch or die, right? Which is a great gift to give to your kids, because that step up in basis means that if they were to turn around and sell their ranch shortly after inheriting it without any appreciable gain happening, they would have no tax liability.
Right.
So that's a super great gift to give to somebody.
Yeah, because their cost basis is based on the value at the time of inheritance, not at the time of you purchasing it, maybe 20 years before that. Correct?
We talked about that last
exactly.
week.
Yeah.
Now, conversely, let's say you've got a very generous rancher and he's got kids and he decides he's going to give them all a $5 million ranch. Well, he's giving them the ranch, but he's also giving them the tax liability that he has. So if he did the right thing and just passed away and then gave it to the kids, that would be a better thing for everybody. But a lot of people like to give that property away before they die.
Well, that's very interesting, Patrick. So let me ask you one more time on limits, because you jumped on one that I was thinking was probably the primary focus of it is diversification. But is there thresholds for how often you can do this, or how often you can do it with an identified property? So, for example, I'm exchanging 1 for 3, and then a year later, maybe I want to exchange each one of those 3 for another 3.
There's no limit on that. In fact, you can. Another reason that people will exchange is, like I said, go back to diversification. Sell 1, buy 3. Also consolidation. Maybe somebody's got, I'm not kidding you. A guy called me and says, man, I've got 500 rent houses. I am crazy trying to manage these things.
Buy an apartment complex.
Can I exchange into 1 property?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is yeah. So you can consolidate too. You can sell 20 rent houses and go buy a multifamily building or a piece of land.
Well, one more on that, Patrick, because this one.
Yeah, Patrick, tell him he's capped out on questions. Okay.
No, this is a good one. So I got 3 rent properties. I want to exchange all of them into a mansion I want to go live in. So into a primary residence now. Will that work for the tax deferral? Because now it's under a private residence and we're under whole different capital gains rules. Is that
okay? So remember in the beginning, I said you can't exchange primary residence. Okay, but you must be reading my mind, because this is something I always have to rein in on because I want to talk about it. There's a way to convert property that you buy with 1031 money, and your scenario is exactly what I talk about in every class I teach. Let's say you've been investing your whole life, right? But you've also been exchanging, right? So you've got 20 properties, 10 properties, whatever, that you've been exchanging into over and over time, right? Now, those properties, it's not like the tax goes away. It's not eliminated. It's deferred. So those properties that you've been exchanging into, they have, generally speaking, very low tax bases. So at the point that you want to sell them, if you don't want to exchange anymore and just take the cash, you're going to have a pretty big tax spike if you do it all at once, especially. But in my dream scenario is I've got 10 properties that I'm going to sell. Let's say they're worth $20 million each, right? And I want to go and buy a lake house or a property in Malibu, right? And I could probably get a 1,200 square foot property in Malibu for that. And so what I'd do is I'd sell all these properties and exchange them into 1 exchange, then buy the dream house, right, that I really want to live in. But according to 1031, I can't. However, there is a revenue procedure that works with 1031, and it's Revenue Procedure 2008-16. Now I'm really letting my geek flag fly.
Do it, Patrick. Go.
My favorite revenue procedure. But you can use that to convert the property that you buy, and it's pretty simple. You buy the property, combining all the proceeds from all these properties you've been deferring forever. And then for 2008-16, I'm going to do an abbreviated version, but it's for the 2 consecutive 12-month periods after you acquire the property. Each 12-month period, you have to rent that property out a minimum of 14 calendar days, charging fair market rent. You can rent it as much as you like, but 14 is the minimum. You can't use it more than 14 days or 10% of the time you have it rented out at fair market rent. But after those 2 12-month periods have elapsed and you reported that income on your federal tax returns and you let your CPA know that you're relying on this for the conversion, you can move into that house as your primary residence, and the IRS can't make you pay the taxes that you deferred to buy it.
That's what I was asking. So there is a way. And
that's interesting.
It sounds like the opposite of deferring your capital gains on the sale. You got to live in it for the last 5 years, and now you got to not live in it for 2.
Yeah.
So.
And here's where it gets weird. And everybody wants to know. That logical question is, well, how do they know that I'm only using 14 days? I'm like, I'm not going to help you commit fraud. Just go by the rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, okay, so let's say I do all of this and then I move into the house and it's awesome for a while, but then I want to move out of it. Well, if you turned it into your primary residence, you're only going to get up to $500,000 exclusion of your capital gain on that sale. And we know that house is going to have a much higher tax liability than that. So the only other option would be to put it back into the rental pool, now rent out the mansion again for 2 years, and reclassify it as an investment property, and then go buy more investment property.
And just keep playing the game. So, Patrick, one of the things that comes to mind when I listen to all of this is, well, actually 2 things. One is that you need to start with a great professional like yourself to pre-plan, to know the rules, to understand how you're going to use this exchange, right? Before you even consider doing it. Like, somebody should probably be consulting with somebody like you and kind of pre-plan it, know the steps, and know what that roadmap looks like, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, part of the team, like having a good broker, real estate broker, a good CPA, a good attorney, and for specialized things like this, somebody like me that can help them with a 1031 exchange. Now, really, all I do are 1031 exchanges, right? So it's a funny niche, but somebody who's knowledgeable about it. I've got customers that have been doing exchanges for generations, and they have, they buy the craziest stuff. And we're talking about some of the wealthiest families in the country. They'll buy, like, there's these great big DST type transactions where we're talking about hundreds of millions, if not billions, that they're investing in to defer taxes, and it's kind of it's like a fractional interest with a debt component. So it's just amazing what some of these people are able to do. And a lot of times, I'm learning too, just like everybody else. I'm going to talk to an attorney, and we're going to figure out, what's the best possible way for somebody to defer the tax liability we got. It helps to have, I tell people all the time, a good broker or a good CPA.
Exactly.
I don't want to do my own taxes.
Exactly.
I've been in real estate. I'm 2nd generation real estate. I worked in title insurance and in finance. And I've been doing this for the last 10 years. And I've bought and sold real estate, but I've never bought and sold without a realtor. I would not write my own real estate contracts. And it's not because, maybe I could, but I want somebody on the hook if something goes wrong, right? Yeah. And that's what you're paying a realtor for. And that's why they're insured. Well, and that's...
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Patrick. And that's, let's imagine for a second that I'm an investor listening to us all right now. I now know that this is a great product and I see the value, and I likely want to do it. But I know I need to have the good agents in our corner, in my corner, and I got that. But for someone who deals with this tedious process, it's very timeline based. what are the steps you would tell me, like, who's my first call? And then at what point do I need to call the next person? Or do I need to get all 4 of them in a Zoom call to even start this process? How would that go? Or how would you suggest it go?
The first time person that's maybe selling a ranch or a farm, or they're selling rent houses, or you're selling your convenience store, the first thing I would want if I were trying to plan it out would be a CPA that's knowledgeable about real estate. Now that's a rarity, and predominantly the CPAs that I work with aren't going to be aware or interested in 1031 exchange. The average CPA is really almost just like a tax preparer. Now, if you can find a good CPA that's looking for things that are going to benefit you, especially in the real estate industry, find a CPA that's knowledgeable about real estate and buying and investing and selling and living in that world. Because, I can't tell you, at first I was shocked that most CPAs didn't seem to know or care about 1031. But as I had more experience with it, I realized, well, that's not what they do. In some cases, a CPA could go an entire career without ever having heard of a 1031 exchange. So to find a professional is good, but to find the one that's right for what you're doing is better. I'd start with a CPA because, first of all, their fees are regulated, that you're not going to get gouged by a CPA. The next would be the attorney. Now, the attorney is great if you reached a certain level and you can afford to keep one on retainer, great. But an attorney that you can reach out to that's reasonable and from a transactional standpoint would be good. Also, you want to see somebody that's in real estate and tax. I can't tell you how many times I refer people out to attorneys. And it's usually over like a partnership split or something that can create some added steps to a 1031 in order for them to be affected. So a good real estate attorney that's also tax oriented is kind of a must. So I'd say in that case, it's CPA, attorney, and then the broker. Now the broker, I'm not putting them last because I don't think they're as important, but I think that the broker is going to be, you're going to choose your broker based on what you're looking to buy and where you're looking to buy. One broker is not going to be perfect for everything. As you guys know, people specialize in different market segments: multifamily, retail, office, industrial, farm and ranch, residential, and they're also regional. So you're going to want to find the person in the area where you're looking. With 1031, that can also be kind of a problem if you're too specific on the area you're looking to buy in, because a lot of times a lot of other people are too, and it's hard to compete.
And you need to have a broker that understands the timelines we talked about, right? So there's someone that can help you in planning, right? The purchase. They may not be involved in the sale, but they could maybe coordinate with the broker that is involved in the sale and have an understanding of our timelines, the rules that you're working with. And sometimes I find, for my clients at least, that are looking to exchange like properties, right? It's another SFR for an SFR maybe, or using the 3-house rule or 3-property rule, that it's helpful to know somebody like me, and I'm not the only one, this isn't just self-promotion, but somebody like me who has a book of business where they have a lot of off-market deals that they can, because in this market, Patrick, like you had mentioned, it's harder to get through that first 45 days and really lock down a property, get something under contract. So if I've got some off-market deals that I can present to an investor, right? If you've got a flow of that happening at all times, then sometimes that's your guy, right? Sometimes that's
Absolutely.
The best person to know.
Yeah. It's especially the off-market people.
Right.
Like I said, if you're able to, cultivate that kind of a business, man, it's to the benefit of your client, especially in 1031, because those deadlines are no joke. They don't change them except for a federally declared disaster. That's the only reason why you might be able to get an extension on the deadline. And, if last winter when we had that winter storm, I was in heaven because there had been so many people because of COVID that weren't either going out looking at properties, but the COVID deal was nothing. They gave us no extension. I mean, practically, because of that one disaster declaration.
So Patrick, I just kind of I'm going to let Kyle close us out a little bit here because we're coming up on an hour and I don't want to bore everybody too much with this, but Patrick, I really want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with us and with our audience. We reuse these things constantly. We send them out and it's really educational to have an understanding of what is a 1031 exchange? Is it right for me? Why do I use it? And sometimes people that are wired like me, you start swimming in the details and sometimes you end up putting it off, right? And you don't do these things that you need to do because you get overwhelmed with all the details that you don't want to know or that you don't want to spend the time to learn. And again, that's why we have people in our lives like our CPAs, like our attorneys, like people like you, Patrick. Patrick, how do people get a hold of you if they want more information about 1031 exchanges?
My number is 972-310-4127. My email is patrick.noonan, and that's Noonan at I as in igloo, P as in Paul, X as in X-ray, 1031.com. That's my corporate email. You can always send an email with an inquiry, and I'll send you more information than you'll probably want. But I'm glad you framed that last bit with, a lot of folks, don't know if they need an exchange. And I am not shoehorning people into doing an exchange. Typically, my first call, I'm going to ask a series of questions that are going to determine whether or not you're really going to want to do this. Mm-hmm. And, in about 30 minutes of discussing the situation that each individual is in, I can usually help them decide whether or not they're going to want to do a 1031 exchange, because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of rules and there's work that has to be done. And you want to make sure that there's enough benefit for you to go through that.
I love it. Good information, Patrick. Thank you very much.
We appreciate it, Patrick. Thank you for letting me play devil's advocate with you as well. So,
hey, Patrick,
anytime, guys.
What's that website? Is that the IPX1031.com?
Yeah, it's so IPX is the company that I work for. We're the largest qualified intermediary in the country. Our parent company is FNTG, or Fidelity National Title Group.
Interesting.
So it's a multi-billion-dollar company. And one of the reasons why we're able to do some of the larger exchanges is because we carry the highest insurances in our industry. So we carry a $100 million Fidelity bond, $50 million performance guarantee, and a $30 million Arizona emissions policy per file. Not that we really ever have to use them, but they're there for people's comfort. And additionally, the safety of proceeds is a big concern of ours. Everybody has a segregated account. There's no commingling of funds or risky investments. It's very, very safe. That's of our primary concern, because there have been companies as big as ours in the past that have been wiped out because they made bad decisions. Basically, they've invested exchangers' proceeds in subprime student-backed loans. Believe that. And so
that's crazy.
In 2007, a giant company went down because of that, right? And then there's bad actors out there too, so you got to be careful. There's an American Greed special on a guy that just took
really.
Yeah. So we've been around the longest. We're personally, I'm stodgy and conservative, and I'm going to try and scare people as much as I can, so that they're doing things well within the rules and not trying to create. And a lot of times people try to recreate the wheel and think that they're going to be able to figure out a way to trick the IRS, but there's a lot of people out there that are trying to do that. And the IRS is pretty good at creating a rule to stop a good idea. If you figure out a way to make money or stop paying taxes, they're going to create a rule to make you pay those taxes. So yeah, but I like what I do, and pretty much like any realtor, I'm available if I'm awake. So you can call me on my cell after hours or weekends, whenever you have to. And I'll be happy to walk you through any of your questions.
I love it, Patrick. We're proud to have you as a referral partner, and I want to thank you one more time for coming on.
Yeah, we do appreciate it. I mean, clearly you're knowledgeable about the subject. So anybody, if you got any more questions, give him a call. And if you want to get to him or got any questions for us, give us a call, 817-818-9039. Shoot us an email, show me the money at wearetpm.com. And thank you guys for tuning in.
All right. Thanks, guys.